Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session from Trust Access Consulting Group. Today, we've got a very interesting topic where we will be discussing about the governance objectives. Okay, and the first governance objectives that we will be discussing today is under the domain of evaluate, direct, and monitor, or shortly called as EDM. Okay. Under this, the topic for today's session is about understanding the nuances of the governance objective EDM01, which deals with ensured governance framework setting and maintenance. Okay, so let's begin the first governance objective under COBIT. Okay, so this concerns around ensuring governance framework is kind of defined and is also subjected to periodic maintenance. Okay. Now, this objective kind of lays the foundation for all the other governance objectives and the applicable activities. Okay. So, this particular objective is focused on establishing and maintaining what you would call as a robust governance framework. Okay, robust governance framework. Now, this ensures that the organization's IT activities are effectively directed, monitored, and aligned with the overall goals of the enterprise. Okay, so in simpler terms, EDM01 ensures that governance itself is governed. Okay, governance itself is governed by defining who should be making the decisions, how the decisions are to be made. Okay, and how the performance and compliance are measured over a period of time. Okay, so these are the things where we will be focusing under this particular governance objective. Now, the governance objective EDM01 basically supports three specific goals for an enterprise that are defined by COBIT, which would reflect what the organization ultimately wants to achieve through effective governance. Okay, so first things first, the first goal it kind of targets is compliance with external laws and regulation. Now, this particular goal basically ensures that enterprise not just complies with the legal and regulatory obligation, but also proactively prevents the non-compliance related incidents. Okay, some of the metrics that it can be used to measure the outcome of this particular enterprise goal would be dependent on what is the cost of regulatory non-compliance, because there is always a financial penalty that is basically applied if you cannot demonstrate that you are exercising due diligence for maintaining compliance requirements against the law of land. Okay, there could be a settlement, there could be a fine. So the cumulative cost of the total financial settlement and fines that are to be paid for regulatory non-compliance can be a metric to see whether we are achieving this goal or not. Okay. The second thing that could be done is the number of regulatory non-compliance issues that are raised by your regulators. Basically, the non-compliance issues could be relative to, say, for an example, user access reviews are not being performed on a periodic basis, or asset inventory is not being maintained, or the financial inaccuracies are reported in the periodic financial reports, or the access controls which are implemented does not comply with the requirements of segregation of duties. Now these are all non compliance issues that the regulators would be evaluating basis the checks and balances that they are required to do when they do the assessment to validate compliance. Okay. The third thing that you can use to evaluate whether you are meeting the targets on this particular enterprise goal is also around the frequency of issues reported to the governing authorities, right? Like, so some of these assessments are being conducted on a quarterly basis, or on a half yearly basis, or on an annual basis, right? Now, some of these issues will be repeated issues, right? And if repeated issues are being reported, and how frequently they are being reported will also be an indicator of whether you have achieved the goal that relates to the EDM01 particular objective. Remember, your enterprise goals basically translate down to IT alignment goals, and IT alignment goals basically translates to your governance or management objectives, right? And since we are talking about this governance objective that relates to EDM01, which deals with ensuring that you have a governance framework in place, um, along with it being maintained, basically allows you to eventually achieve the enterprise goal that is related to compliance with regulatory requirement or the guardrails, right? So this is the first goal that you would try and achieve by implementing the activities that are defined under this particular governance objective. Now, what is the second governance objective that you should be targeting when you are dealing with this particular governance objective? Now, the second one is basically related to the optimization of internal business process functionality. Okay. Now, this particular goal emphasizes process efficiency. One, it emphasizes process efficiency, and the second piece it targets is your effectiveness. Okay. Now, ensuring that the governance framework that you are creating at an enterprise level, it supports the expectation of a continuous process improvement. Okay. Now, similarly, here also you can define multiple metrics to see whether you are achieving the intention behind this particular goal. Like, say, for an example, how much your board and executive leadership is satisfied with the business process capabilities that are defined. Like, say, for an example, a business process can be anything. Like, say, for an example, you are converting your leads to, the leads from a sales perspective into deals, right? Likewise, how your payroll process has been defined, how your HR related processes are defined, how your accounts related processes are defined. These are all business processes, right? Now, the eventual consumer of these business processes is essentially with different layers within the executive management within the enterprise that are leading the respective products or towers. Like, say, for example, someone would be leading the sales product, someone will be leading the HR product or the finance product, right? Now, how much satisfied they are on the delivery of IT enabled services, and also how is your board satisfied, right? That is one. So internally, your stakeholders would be your board and your executive management. Likewise, there are external parties whose satisfaction levels needs to be measured as well, and that would relate to the customers as well as the suppliers, to whom you supply to, or the suppliers who supply it to you, right? when it comes to delivery of service and your demonstration of supply chain capabilities. And the third piece is what is the satisfaction levels of the suppliers within the entire supply chain capabilities ecosystem, right? Together, these show whether governance is driving measurable improvements in the operational outcomes, right? That was the second enterprise goal that this particular enterprise objective is targeting. And the third one is around managed digital transformation programs, right? Now, this particular goal focuses on ensuring that digital initiatives within an enterprise, be it like, say, for an example, cloud only as an initiative strategy, or the or as a goal that an enterprise is curating, or basically ensuring that centralization of IT operations can be a digital initiative, or using a standard product architecture and application suite across the enterprise can be a digital initiatives, right? So whatever digital initiatives that are defined within an enterprise in a operational, tactical, and a strategic level are always governed effectively, basically delivering the business value and staying within the constraints of your time and budget. Okay. Now, there are multiple metrics likewise here also, which you can leverage to see whether your governance objectives are achieving this particular goal. Like, say, for an example, a percentage of your programs which are delivered on time and budget. Like, say, for an example, you are running uh, five different digital initiatives, of which only three or four are basically being delivered on time. So, you have around 80% of compliance criteria against this particular metric. Similarly, what is the percentage of your stakeholders who are satisfied with the outcomes of the delivery that you are providing to them? Similarly, a percentage of program that had to be stopped prematurely because of incorrect estimation of budget and cost and time could also be one of the metric. And finally, one of the other metrics that you can also leverage here is around the percentage of programs that provide regular accurate status updates. Now, these would measure in total, will indicate how your governance is actually contributing to the disciplined program execution and overall ensuring the transparency of the investments, delivering its expected outcomes within the IT ecosystem, right? Now, with that, as I have stated, your enterprise goals defined at the enterprise levels. Now, IT from its own internal goals should be designed in such a manner that it would be eventually achieving or striving to achieve the enterprise goals, right? Now, for here you will have to define some of the IT related alignment goals that would aid towards achievement of those enterprise goals that we just discussed. So, there are a couple of alignment goals from an IT standpoints, which are closely related to EDM01 governance objective. Basically, your first one and the third one, your both of these kind of ensure your IT initiatives are not operating in silos or in isolation, but always aligned to the priorities of the business. Okay. So the first IT alignment goal that is again curated from the enterprise goals that we just discussed is around ensuring your IT compliance and support for business compliance with external laws and regulatory guardrails, right? Now, this particular alignment goals ensures that whatever IT system, like, say, for an example, you have an ERP system or a CRM system or your HRMS systems, etc. Whatever IT systems that you have got in your enterprise, whatever data practices that you follow relative to data storage, data analytics, data cleansing, data quality, etc., as well as the IT processes around, say, for example, change management, incident management, or whatever IT related processes are defined, they are all compliant with applicable legal, regulatory, and contractual guardrails, right? Now, these can be measured again. These are specific to IT, right? So you can take a cumulative cost of non-compliance that is curated because of IT related inefficiencies, which had resulted in financial penalties, settlements, and operational losses, right? Eventually to the business. Likewise, you can also measure the number of IT related non compliance issues that has been identified from internal audits or assessments or external assessments that are being done. Now, these could also be an indicator of how your IT ecosystem is performing, and the number of compliance related issues that are tied to contracts with IT service providers will tell you how your supply chain or IT supply chain ecosystem is operating, right? So, the objective behind this particular alignment goal that is to be achieved by ensuring whatever activities that are identified under this particular governance objective is actually meeting is to ensure that IT governance always plays a proactive role in maintaining the regulatory assurance and the trust of your stakeholders, right? And finally, there is another goal as well. This particular enterprise governance objective will be meeting, and that would be around realized benefits from IT enabled investments and service portfolio, right? Now, this particular goal is about value realization, ensuring that IT investments deliver what they have actually promised. Now, there are certain metrics that could be associated with this as well. Like, say, for an example, the percentage of IT enabled investments where claimed business case benefits were actually met or exceeded. Like, say, for an example, you have invested $100,000 uh, towards bringing in a new tool for ensuring the security operation center is operating smoothly as expected, right? Now, how many number of uh, threats they are able to proactively detect before they are being realized as a risk, right? So basically, you have multiple such investments done. Out of all those investments, every investment that is done must be always preceded with business cases, right? And the applicable benefits. So, which particular investment has actually yielded the benefits that were presented in the business case? What is the percentage of that? Is what this metric should be designed to evaluate whether you are able to meet that particular alignment goal around business realization, right, or benefit realization. One of the other things that could be done is around the percentage of IT services where your expected benefits like performance improvements or cost savings are also realized as per your service level agreements which are defined. Now, this particular alignment goal reinforces what a strong governance framework basically doesn't just manage compliance, it is also driving your value optimization from technology related investments, right? So, some of the key takeaways basically, your EDM01 aligns basically this particular governance objective where you are dealing with ensured governance framework, setting, and maintenance. Basically, aligns your governance structure, compliance, and value realization into one cohesive framework, ensuring that your governance policies complies with the laws and the regulatory guardrails. Your governance practices optimize internal processes and digital initiatives, and your governance outcome translates into measurable business value. Now, by linking enterprise and alignment goals through EDM01 business governance objective, organizations will be able to establish a what you call as a disciplined, transparent, and value driven governance foundation, which is essential for sustainable IT along with the applicable enterprise or a business alignment, right? So, this is the first thing that, or the first topic that is under this particular specific governance objective that we are discussing. Let's now move on to the next one, right? Here, what we'll do is we will be exploring to achieve this particular governance objective, like what this governance objective is all about. What are the practices that we should be having, and what are some of the activities we must have in place in order to achieve the objectives behind this particular governance objective, right? So so this particular objective, as we have discussed before, basically is resident when the within the governance domain. Evaluate, direct, and monitor, which stands for EDM, right? And it focuses on ensuring that your enterprise establishes, then it directs, right? And then it monitors, right? Basically, uh, ensuring that the enterprise establishes, directs, and maintains an effective governance system for your information and technology. So, in your simpler terms, your EDM01 will ensure that IT governance is structured, deliberate, and continuously improved. So, structured, deliberate, and what you call as continuously improved. Okay. So so uh, i- this will ensure that your IT supports the enterprise goals and delivers the measurable value. So let's understand what this objective is all about. What is its purpose and what are applicable practices. So this particular objective states that, or at least aims to analyze and articulate the requirements for the governance of your enterprise IT. And what it is doing is it is establishing and maintaining, right? It is establishing and maintaining the required governance components, right? There are different governance components. Like, say, for an example, you need to define the activities that needs to be in place. You need to define the organizational structure. You will need to define the processes. You will have to define certain cultural elements. You have to define, or at least hire the people with the required skills, and all those components that are there in the governance expectations, right, are clearly defined and maintained with appropriate authority and accountability assigned to them. Okay. So this ensures that your governance system basically supports the organization's mission, goals, and objectives, right? Now, it has got multiple purposes. The first thing it deals with is around ensuring that you follow a consistent approach for making all your IT related decisions, right? And it ensures that IT decisions are aligned with your enterprise strategies, along with its objectives and desired outcomes, while ensuring there is always transparency, compliance, and accountability. Now, this particular objective basically includes three key practices, right? The first one is around evaluating the governance system, second one is around directing the governance system, and third one is around monitoring the governance system, right? So, uh, let's explore each of these practice in detail, and identify what are some of the activities that you should be doing in order to achieve or implement this particular practice that is defined within this governance objective, right? Now, uh, the first thing, or the first practice that is under this governance objective is to evaluate the governance system. Now, here the goal is to understand and assess. Okay, so understand and do an assessment. Okay, understand and assess the governance environment that you are operating with, right? Now, there would be certain internal factors and there will be certain external factors, right? That you need to be aware of. And uh, also evaluate whether the governance framework that you're trying to establish or is already existing is suitable for the evolving needs of your enterprise. Okay. Now, this would involve continuous engagement from your stakeholders who have an understanding of the business and regulatory contexts that are evolving on a regular basis, and evaluating the current design and the future design of the governance framework. Okay. Now, how are you going to measure this particular practice is yielding the outcome? How is your evaluation process that has been defined of the governance systems that has been in place is operating as expected, right? Then there are few metrics that you can use, like say for an example, how many number of your guide or guarding principles or guiding principles that are defined for your IT governance and decision making expectations. How many number of senior executives or board level executives are involved in defining the direction of the governance for your enterprise IT. Similarly, these metrics can definitely be giving you an objective or giving an bird's eye view of whether the framework that has been in place for evaluating with how your governance system itself is operating can can give you an indication of its KPI, right? Key performance indicator. Now, um, in order to achieve this particular practice, there are a few activities that could be performed. Like I'm talking about this EDM 1.01, right? So the first thing that you can do is you analyze internal and external environmental factors. Okay. So um, here you are expected to evaluate what your legal requirements are, what your regulatory requirements are, and what are your contractual obligations, right? What are your contractual obligations? And at the same time, you will also need to understand what are the trends that is being seen in the industry, what your competitors are doing. Okay, that might have an impact on the design of your governance system. Like, say, for an example, this new AI Act that has been published within the European Union, or a new data privacy regulatory requirements, um, or regulatory requirements on emerging technologies like generative AI or responsible AI might require you to make adjustments or amendments in your governance models that you have curated. Now, this particular activity you must do in order to achieve a maturity level of at least 2, which is a managed level, right? Then you need to uh, determine the significance of your IT investment. This is the second activity that you should be doing to achieve this EDM 1.01 active or practice, that is around determine what is your IT significance, right? To business, right? Now, you will have to do an assessment of how critical IT, which involves information as well as technology, are to achieve the objectives of the enterprise in general, and how governance should reflect that importance. Like, for an example, uh, you are a digital first company or a cloud first company or a SaaS first company, right? Um, Here, your IT is core to the success of your business. And therefore, your governance must be more comprehensive and formalized. Now, these are some of the basic requirements. You are required to do this to achieve a capability maturity level of 2 minimum, right? Um, and then the next activity that you can do in order to achieve this practice outcome like EDM 1.01 is around basically considering external laws and regulations, right? Now, depending upon the type of your industry, depending upon the geography that you're operating with, right? Like say for an example, if you're operating in European Union, you might have to be compliant with GDPR requirement. If you are operating in California within North America, you need to be compliant with the CCPA requirement. If you are handling or dealing with credit card based transaction, you might have to be compliant with PCI DSS requirement. Or if your company is registered in or is a publicly listed company, then you will have to be compliant with the Sarbanes-Oxley requirement, right? So you will need to identify and then even go one step further, where in association with your legal teams within your enterprise, interpret the legal guardrails and regulatory guardrails and some of the contractual obligation that can have a direct implication for your IT governance, right? This ensures that through your IT related activities, you are always ensuring compliance with applicable regulatory frameworks. Okay, this is again required to achieve a baseline maturity level of 2, which is a managed state. Okay, and then you go and implement one more activity that can also be implemented relative to the achievement of the outcome of uh, this particular objective is your let me clean the ink on the slide is the other objective that you can do here is aligning ethical usage of information. Okay, now um, in an IT or digital first enterprise, right, where IT is or the IT enabled services run the crux of the enterprise business processes, you will be generating a lot of data with meaning that translates into information, right? And that information can have potentially identifiable information for individuals, or something uh, very sensitive in terms of the social impact as well as your environmental impacts, right? So what you do with that particular information, or how you are processing that data and use that technology to process the data, you should ensure that it should reflect the organization's ethical standards that are being defined, right? Say for an example, because of your line of business, you have phone numbers collected as part of your registration requirements, and you have the phone numbers for around 100,000 people. Now what you do with that information is up to you, right? So you can sell it in the open market, or you must ensure there are safeguards in place, right, around that particular information. Similarly, how much carbon footprint you generate, and what are your sustainability commitments. So your information should be curated in such a manner that you are able to achieve your sustainability commitments, which would have an outcome on ensuring that you are able to meet the ESG targets that are defined for the enterprise. This goes, if you implement this particular activity, you will go into a maturity of one level up into a capability level 3 in the CMMI scale of 1 to 5. Okay, so this is one of the activities that you can implement to improve the maturity of the governance system that you are trying to build. Okay, so the other activity that can be implemented relative to this particular practice in EDM 1.01 is defining what you call defining, guiding governance principles. Okay. Now, you will have to establish some of the foundational principles that would define how governance and decision making will be operating within your IT departments. Like, say, for an example, how are you going to establish accountability for actions as well as inactions? How do you ensure there is transparency in your decision making? And how do you align the IT related investments and outcomes align with ensuring enterprise related value is generated? Okay. So these guiding governance principles must also be defined. These are the foundational principles that you must define, and that would also allow you to improve your maturity to a level of 3. Okay. Similarly, the next activity that you should be doing in order to evaluate the governance system, or at least validate, is whether there is, or at least determine what is the decision making model that is defined within the enterprise. Like, how are the decisions being made within the enterprises? Who decides? Who approves? Who contributes? Right? Who decides, who contributes, who approves. Um, Now, this could give or even involve an IT governance board or IT gov board, or even a steering committee or a steerco, or even some of the delegated authorities. Now, what governance model or decision making model is there is something that you must also determine when you are evaluating the governance system, right? So, let me clean this particular ink. Give me a moment. Okay. So, what are the other activities, or what possibly could be the other activities that could be in place in order to measure the outcome of this particular practice? Say, for an example, you can also curate or define or whether validate whether the delegation and authority levels are defined and documented, right? Now, you must curate or define thresholds, right? Thresholds for making decision. Like, say, for any investment beyond $50,000 must be approved by X person. For any investment beyond $100,000 must be approved by the governance board or something like that, right? You must specify thresholds for decision making, including the limits for approval and wherever applicable, an escalation criteria. Okay. So, uh, mm, so for an example, so eventually, if you are achieving the this particular activity, then you can also move into a maturity level of 3. Okay. So, the overall outcome this particular practice is going to give you is around ensuring that your governance framework, whatever it is defined, must be evaluated to evolving regulatory requirements or contractual obligations or business environments is evolved, and then you must evaluate it on a periodic basis to validate whatever governance framework that has been in place, or if you are curating a new governance framework, it should be designed in a manner that it is aligned, principled, and responsive to both the needs of the businesses as well as the influences that might be coming from external factors. Okay. Now, that was all about EDM 1.01, which was around evaluation of the governance system. Now, let's um, move on to the second practice within this particular governance objective is around directing the governance system. Now, once the governance system has been evaluated, your next step is to define direction. Okay, define direction. Okay, and now this involves you will have to establish certain structures, you will have to to assign responsibilities, etc., and ensure commitment from your leadership. Okay, leadership commitment. Okay, to achieve certain governance goals, the goals that we discussed in the previous slide, right? Now, what are some of the metrics to evaluate whether you are achieving the outcome of this particular practice, right? The one of the metrics that you can use is evaluating the degree to which whatever IT governance principle that you have curated as part of your EDM 1.01 is evident in the day to day business processes and practices. Like, say, for an example, the percentages of your processes and practices that could be traced back to the principles, right? This could be one of the metric. Similarly, you can also identify what is the frequency of IT governance reporting to the executive committee as well as the board. How frequently IT governance reports are presented to the board, right? And the other thing that you can do is the number of roles, responsibilities, and authorities that are defined, right? For your IT related governance, right? And how many of them are assigned actually on the ground and is accepted by appropriate business stakeholders or other business units within the enterprise, as well as by the IT management. So these are some of the metrics that you can use to measure the outcome of this practice, which surrounds directing the governance system, that is EDM 1.02. Okay, so now let's try and understand what should we do, or so what are some of the activities that would be done in order to achieve the outcomes of this particular practice around directing the governance system. Okay, so first activity that you should be doing is communicating your governance principles. Okay, now you need to work with the executive management within the enterprise, as a board, to establish what is a shared understanding of your IT governance principles. Okay, and ensure that leadership commitment is visible. Okay, so board must actively invest their time and effort towards understanding what are the IT governance principles, and they should lead by example. Okay, so when the board does this, they will gain buy-in from the executive management as well as the one that are operating downstream, and ensure that governance is always seen as a strategic enabler rather than just a bureaucratic layer that is operating within the enterprise. Now, this is something that you must have in order to achieve a maturity of level of at least two, right? Then the second thing that you could do possibly is uh, establish or at least delegate the governance structures and processes within the enterprise as a board or as a leadership, right? You must define how the governance will be functioning. What are the different committees? Like, say, for an example, your audit committee, your strategic committee, or your steering committee, etc., must be defined and curated. What frameworks should be in place, and what are the practices that are documented relative to your governance processes? Right now, this could involve curating or defining what you call as a IT governance board, or a risk oversight committee, or an audit committee, for an example. Now, this must also be there to achieve a minimum maturity level of 2 within an enterprise. Okay. So the next thing that you could do is around the same IT governance board. So you should establish something called as an IT gov board. Okay. Uh, Here you should formally set up a board or a steering group to have an oversight of the IT governance at an enterprise level. Now, this body will ensure that any IT investments and strategies are always aligned with the priorities of the business. Okay, again, this is needed to have at least a capability level of 2, right? And then the other thing that you could do is allocate authority and accountability, right? This is important, right? Now, you need to define who is responsible, who is accountable, right? For IT related decision making. Okay. Following the models that has been agreed, that we discussed in other activities or other practices within this particular governance objective, right? So define who will be responsible and who will be accountable for your decision making. Okay. So this will ensure clear ownership and eliminate confusion around decision making. Okay, now this, if you are able to implement, you will be able to achieve a maturity level of 3 in a scale of 1 to 5 from CMMI. Okay, now the other thing that could be also done under directing the governance system is around communication. Okay, so you need to ensure effective communication and reporting mechanisms are defined within the enterprise. Okay, so you will have to develop reporting mechanisms to ensure that all governance practices receive accurate and timely information for that would aid in your decision making. Like, say, for an example, you can define standardized dashboards or scorecards or heat maps that could define the visibility of the performance on the ground in the different segments where investments have been done relative to IT. Again, if you are implementing this, you will be able to achieve a minimum maturity level of 3 in a scale of 1 to 5 from CMMI, right? And then the other activity that could be done is directing ethical and professional conduct. Okay. Now, this will ensure whatever governance guidance that has been provided is in line with certain behavioral standards, right? Like, say, for an example, integrity, fairness, right? And professionalism, and that non-compliance must have defined consequences. So this brings or integrates cultures and ethics into the governance process. Again, this will help you to achieve a maturity level of 3. Okay. And then the other thing that you could also do in order to implement this particular practice is around promoting what you would call a reward system. Okay, you must promote a reward system for bringing a cultural change. Like, say, for an example, you must implement mechanisms that recognizes and reinforces desirable governance related behaviors. For instance, um, rewarding teams that demonstrate strong compliance or innovation under the governance principles, right? So this is something that you can do, and also achieve a maturity level of 3 in a scale of 1 to 5 from CMMI. So, what are the outcomes from implementing this practice? Is around having a functioning governance structure with clear roles, ethical standards, and effective communication channels that would drive alignment between your IT and business leadership. Okay, so that is all about the EDM 1.02, which was around the practice of directing the governance system. Okay, and the third practice that is associated with this particular governance objective is monitoring the governance system. Now, this is the final step, ensuring that whatever governance mechanisms that are defined, or the governance framework that has been defined, is is functioning effectively. Okay, performances are tracked, improvements are being made and tracked whenever applicable or necessary. Now, this practice will ensure there is enough oversight, okay, um, and accountability to maintain the integrity of your governance framework and its relevance as well. Okay. Some of the metrics that can be used is what is the actual time taken versus the target cycle time for making key decisions concerning IT, right? Like, say your target is like when a proposal is sent to the IT governance board, it must be reviewed within a week. Now, some of them are cleared within a week. Some of them basically take more than 2 to 3 weeks because of bureaucratic hurdles, right? Now, that will basically give an indication that your governance system is not effectively operating, right? You must collect this particular metric outcome on a regular basis to see how your governance system is functioning, right? And then, what is the frequency of independent reviews that are being done by the internal audit, external audit, or some of the external consulting firm around the operations of your IT governance. That is also an useful indicator. What is the level of stakeholder satisfaction that can be identified by sending out surveys and understanding the outcomes? And what is the number of IT related governance issues that are being reported? So, all these metrics will tell you how your governance framework that you have defined is operating, right? This is part of the evaluating the monitoring processes that are implemented within the governance system. So, what are the activities that we can implement in order to implement this practice around monitoring the governance system, right? So the first one that you can implement is performing an assessment of the performance of the governance function or governance framework. Now you can evaluate whether stakeholders who are provided with delegated responsibility for IT governance are performing effectively. Now this could involve periodic performance reviews or governance maturity assessments, right? Now, this is one thing that could be done, and the other thing that could be done is an assessment of governance mechanisms. Okay, so you need to regularly review whether established structures, processes, and principles are functioning as intended. So, a gap assessment must be conducted, and if a gap is identified, like ineffective decision making forums, corrective measures must be implemented. Now, if you are implementing this, you are already targeting a maturity level of 4 in a scale of 1 to 5 in CMMI. Okay. The other thing that could be also implemented is evaluating the effectiveness of your design for governance framework. Okay, evaluate governance design effectiveness. Okay, now this would also provide you a maturity level of 4. So here you must examine whether the current governance framework design fits for the purpose. Now this will ensure adaptability to evolving business or technological changes within the enterprise. Okay. So other activities that could be performed as well. Let me clear the ink on this particular slide. Like say for an example, you must also what you call monitor compliance basically with obligations, right? So you will need to maintain an oversight on how well IT basically complies with legal, regulatory, contractual, and internal policy requirements. Now, this is important for sectors that are heavily regulated, like, say, for an example, your finance, healthcare. Again, it will be dependent on the geography where you are operating and the line of business that you are operating with, right? If you are taking credit card transactions, for example, you must demonstrate compliance against PCI DSS requirement. Again, if you are having a mechanism to monitor compliance against the obligations within the governance layer itself, then you can target a maturity level of 4. Okay. Then the other thing that could be done is around having an oversight of enterprise control systems, right? So whatever IT related control systems, like say for an example, ERM or enterprise risk management or internal and external audit and compliance assessments that are being carried out, they are all effective and aligned with the overall control environment. So this would require some level of coordination between your internal audit as well as your compliance teams. Now, this if you are monitoring, then you should be able to target a maturity level of 4. Okay. And the other thing that you could also do is what you call establish routine monitoring mechanisms. Okay. So here you can implement recurring monitoring processes like dashboards, compliance reports, risk tracking to ensure continuous visibility into your governance performance. Now, this would enable data driven decision making and early identification of issues that might be there in your governance framework. So again, this will allow you to have a maturity level of 4, right? So the outcome is whenever you have a continuously evaluated governance framework, basically that would so, whenever you have a continuously evaluated governance system that remains effective, compliant, and capable of supporting enterprise objective, your as in proportion to the evolving business parameters like the regulatory guardrails or contractual obligation or say for an example your business environment basically allows you to have a effective and a compliant governance framework. Okay. So in summary, whatever practices and activities that we just discussed now through the outcome of the governance objective EDM01 that concerns ensured governance framework setting and maintenance will ensure that whatever governance of enterprise IT that has been in place or the framework that hasn't been placed is not just defined once and forgotten. It must be evaluated, directed, and monitored on an ongoing basis. Okay. So, this particular objective establishes a closed loop governance model where feedback from monitoring continuously improves the decision making and ensures IT continues to deliver sustained business value on a short to long term. Right. So your EDM01 basically forms the foundation for the COBIT's governance approach, setting the tone for all the other objectives that we will be discussing in the later sessions as well. Okay. Um, that would involve your governance objective as well as your management objectives. Okay. So now that we have discussed what are the practices, what are the activities that are enclosed inside this particular governance objective, now let's look at the organizational structure that must be in place to have an effective and efficient governance system, right? Where IT is aligned with the business requirements, and risks are managed, and value is constantly delivered. Okay. So, so this particular component within the governance objective that deals with the organizational structures focuses on defining roles and responsibilities around the organizations that make governance effective. So, there is a RACI matrix enclosed by COBIT under this particular governance objective, and basically RACI stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed, to clearly assign the ownership for key governance practices, right? Um, so, so we discussed in the previous slide about three major practices. The first one concerned around evaluation of the governance system. Now that involved everything from assessment of how well the existing governance framework supports enterprise goals. It includes evaluating the principles, structures, and processes that are in place, and identifying whether they are effective, efficient, and aligned with the objectives of the business. So, in this case, as you can imagine, your board and the executive committee, actually, the board basically is accountable to ensure the activities that we discussed in the previous slide are implemented on the ground. While your executive committee and the office of the chief executive officer, chief information officer, and the IT governance board are all responsible for executing and reporting on these evaluations. So this will ensure that the governance systems remains relevant, compliant, and capable of driving the enterprise performance. The second practice that we discussed in the previous slide was concerning directing the governance system. Now, once the evaluation is done, the next step is about providing the strategic direction for governance improvements, right? So, here again, the board has to have the accountability around directing what should be there within the governance framework, whether as per the outcomes of the evaluation that is being done. Board is definitely accountable, but your executive committee, like your strategic committee, or the audit committees, steering committees, whatever that are there within the realms of the board, must be responsible. And since it's a cumulative decision, right? An individual cannot have an effective direction. So it should be a cumulative decision. Therefore, the outcomes of the executive committee meetings as well as the IT governance board meetings must be responsible for ensuring whatever direction given by the board are being translated or directed on the downstream. Okay. So, basically the this practice ensures that governance is not just theoretical, but actively influences how the organization operates and makes strategic choices. Okay. And finally, the governance framework, which was evaluated and directed for improvements, must also be periodically monitored and continuously monitored to verify that it remains effective over a period of time. Now, this would include tracking governance performance indicators, compliance metrics, and periodic results from the reviews and assessments and the audits that are being performed, right? So, again, the accountability for the fact that these monitoring is performed is resident with the board. While responsibility is evenly spread across your executive committees, that is your strategic committees or steering committees or the audit committees, as well as your chief executive officer, as well as the chief information officer and the IT governance board, right? So the responsibility is basically split. So this cyclic process where you evaluate how your governance framework is currently defined, and is it in line with the evolving regulatory requirements or what you call legal requirements or contractual obligations or business environment, whether the governance framework is equipped to meet to these evolving requirements. Once you evaluate, then you would be directing the changes And once you define and direct those changes and validate whether they are being implemented into the governance framework that has been curated. Now, this is a cyclical approach and ensures your governance framework maturity continuously evolves with the organization's requirements and external changes. Now, the beauty of COBIT, like how we discussed before as well, lies in the fact of lies in the fact that it can be easily implemented to demonstrate compliance with certain other frameworks like the COSO Enterprise Risk Management Framework has a principle number 2 under the section 6 where governance and culture has been a focus. Basically, emphasizes setting the tone at the top and embedding governance into the organizational behavior. Likewise, by implementing this, you can also demonstrate compliance against the ISO 38502 series, which was published in 2017, right? Which defines the responsibilities of the governing body and clarifies how executive management and governance structures should interact to ensure accountability and direction. Now, there is also a King 4 report on corporate governance for South Africa, which was published in 2006. This is again a cornerstone reference in the governance practices. Its part 2 defines some of the core governance concepts, and its part 5.3 explains governing structures, delegations, and principles of accountability and oversight. Now, together, these references kind of allow you to validate whether implementing these ideology that has been curated within the COBIT framework around governance of enterprise IT. It'll be allowed to. I mean, you will be able to demonstrate compliance with other frameworks as well. Okay, so now that we have covered the high level goals, objectives, and as well as the organizational structures that must be there in order to implement this particular governance objective, now let's shift our focus to some of the information flows and items that must be in place, which basically explains the key inputs and outputs being exchanged between the governance and management processes. So, for an example, we will be discussing the other management objectives in subsequent sessions that we will be having. But at a high level, let me walk through each governance practice that we just discussed and understand what information that you will need and what information that you will give as an output. Now, some of these information that you will be needing is collected as an input from certain other management objectives and the activities that we'll be discussing in the subsequent sessions. And some of the outcomes that you will be creating here will also be supporting other objectives as well. Okay. So don't, for now, don't pay attention to the IDs of the objectives, the management objectives that will be filling in the information or will be getting the information. But for the time being, just know like what information that you will need and what information that you will be producing. Okay. So EDM 1 dot 01, which focuses on evaluation of how well the governance system is performing in terms of its effectiveness, compliance, alignment with the business goals. So you will need information coming in from which will we will need information which provides communication about the changed compliance requirement or the regulatory requirement. Now, this will ensure that the governance system remains up to date with regulatory or business changes. Outside of COBIT sources, your organization's constitution, bylaws, governance, statutes, laws, and regulatory guardrails, as well as your business environment trends. These external inputs are important because governance framework must reflect not only internal operations but also external expectations like new laws or emerging industry standards. Now, the output of these practices basically will be around enterprise governance guiding principles, which will set the tone for all other governance activities. It will also curate or help you curate a decision making model which will define who has the authority to make what types of governance or operational decision, and defined authority levels, which will establish clear accountability lines within the enterprise. Now, these outputs are shared across all EDM processes as well as the related management processes as well. Okay, which will handle enterprise strategy, management, and architecture. And as I have stated, for now, just take this idea that some information is collected, some information is produced as part of the EDM 1.01 practice. Okay. So the overall objective from EDM 1.01 practice under this governance objective is to ensure that the governance system remains current, structured, and contextually relevant. Okay. So the second one was around directing the governance system. Now, once the evaluation is complete, again the next step is where you direct the governance system, essentially providing strategic guidance for improvements. Now, the inputs for this practice are drawn primarily from the outputs from ADM 1.01, because once the evaluation is complete, then only you can direct what needs to be there or what improvements that are to be made, right? Um, so the outputs here include something like enterprise governance communication, which will ensure everyone in the organization understands the governance model that the enterprise is following, what are the roles and responsibility is defined, right? And as we have discussed, a reward system approach which links good governance performance to recognition and incentives, reinforcing accountability and desired behaviors is something that could also be curated as an outcome for this particular practice. Okay, so so this ensures that governance doesn't remain theoretical but becomes embedded into the organizational culture and performance management. And the third one, which was around monitoring the governance system, once evaluation is complete, direction has been provided, whether the direction is actually implemented must be monitored, right? So the governance system must be monitored continuously to ensure that it is functioning effectively and any non-compliance is addressed, and that improvement opportunities are always identified. Now, this process relies on a wide range of inputs, primarily coming out of monitoring, evaluation, and assurance processes or the objectives. So, MEA is a set of management objectives that we will be discussing extensive details in our other sessions. But for now, you just remember that you will need performance reports offering data on how governance processes are functioning on the ground. You will need status and results from the actions from governance or compliance initiatives. You will require results and internal control monitoring, as well as benchmarking and evaluations, giving valuable insights into the maturity of your performance of the governance systems. You will need the result of your self assessments, enabling governance bodies to evaluate their own effectiveness. You will require compliance confirmations from external assessors, ensuring that the organizations remain within the legal and regulatory guardrails that has been defined. Um, um, you will also need compliance assurance report, including non-compliance findings. What are the root cause analysis and the suggested recommendations that could be also curated, and any external sources like audit reports and obligations can also contribute third-party assurance and validation. So the main output from this process is essentially the feedback on governance effectiveness and performance. Now, the feedback loops back into all ADM and APO processes, ensuring that governance is a living system constantly refined through evidence and learning. Okay. Now, this particular information flows are referring one key external standard like NIST Special Publication 800-37, which is the risk management framework, specifically in the section 3.1, which focuses on inputs and outputs of governance and risk management activities. Now, this particular standard reinforces the principle that governance, evaluation, and direction must be data driven, transparent, and integrated into the risk and compliance management. Okay. So there are last few components that are there, which concerns around people, skills, competencies, certain policies and procedures, some of the cultural and ethical parameters, and some of the infrastructure and applications that must be in place. So the other components within the governance objectives basically form the operational backbone of the governance framework, ensuring that governance is not just documented, but it is actually practiced, supported, and sustained across the enterprise. Right. So your component D, which concerns around people, skills, and competencies. So basically, every governance system is only as strong as the people who would implement and uphold it, right? Now, this particular component focuses on developing and maintaining the skills and competencies that are necessary to support the effective IT and information system governance, right? So, key skill areas that are highlighted here. One is the information systems governance. Now, this has been sourced from e-competence framework. It is a common European framework for ICT professionals. So it emphasizes that professionals should understand the governance principles, what are the roles and structures, ensuring that IT decision making aligns with the organizational strategy. So you will be finding that information under the section E, or specifically E.9, which concerns around information system governance, right? And there is you will also need people who are skilled in IT governance, reference from the skills framework for the information age as well, SFIA. This is also a freely available document, skills framework document. They have highlighted what are the skills that must be there, and the people who are associated with discharging the activities that we just discussed in the previous slides under the section GOVN concerning governance, right? So they basically says that the people who should be hired must have a skill which focuses on establishing the framework for decision making, accountability, and performance management of the IT enabled investments. Now, it ensures professionals are capable of defining, implementing, and continuously improving the governance process. So, in short, this component ensures that the organization builds a strong governance capability by training people to think, act, and decide through the lens of a governance, not just a technical and operational one. Okay. Now that what are the people, or who are the people, what skills they should be having, what information that they should be collecting, what information that they are producing that will be consumed for other objectives, governance and management objectives. The other component that you must also be curating is about the policies and procedures that must be defined at an enterprise level in order to achieve the outcomes of this particular governance objective, right? Now, the first policy is the delegation of authority policy. Now, this policy defines which decisions are retained by the board, which are delegated to other levels within the enterprise. Now, it specifies in the principles of delegation, outlines what you call as boundaries, right? And describes the organizational structure that would be receiving the delegated authority. So, the intent of this particular policy is to ensure there is clarity, there is accountability, okay, and there is transparency in the decision making across the governance framework. Now, it draws references from several key publications like your ISO 38500 standard, its first principle that concerns around responsibility, and its fifth principle that concerns around delegation, right? Similarly, the other policy that must be curated is around the governance policy. Now, this kind of serves as the guiding charter for the governance in the enterprise. Now, it sets out principles like IT governance being an integral part to the enterprise success, strategic alignment between IT and business goals and enterprise goals. There is transparent prioritization based on the business value and risk. There is fair and consistent enforcement of governance standards that are defined, right? So, this also emphasizes continuous improvement, ensuring that governance must evolve with changing technologies and business priorities. Again, if you take a look on the NIST special publication 800-53 that deals with information security controls, basically references this in their section around planning. Okay, so together these policies ensure that governance, again, the objective is to not keep governance as a theoretical framework, but as an operational discipline supported by defined responsibilities and regular oversight. Okay. So, the other thing that you must also, the other component that must be there relative to this particular objective is around culture, ethics, and behavior. Now, this component focuses on embedding governance into the organizational culture. Okay. So, governance does not succeed through policy alone, right? It thrives when leaders lead by example. Okay. So, uh, so basically, the leaders must demonstrate ethical behavior and set the tone at the top. Okay. So, some of the key cultural elements that could be around identification and communication of the decision making culture that has been defined within the enterprise, ensuring that transparency and accountability are part of your decision making process, and and are part of the daily operations. So, the other thing that it can do is it can promote ethical, what you call ethical leadership, right? So, ethical leadership where executives model the behavior that they expect from others and encourage behaviors that align with the values of enterprise, like fairness for an example, responsible for an example, and integrity for an example, in all governance related decisions. Now, again, inputs are being taken from well-known standards like NIST special publication 800-53 or ISO 38500, etc. Okay. This ensures that governance is not just compliance driven, it is values driven and forms the organization's ethical DNA, right? And then the last component is around services, infrastructure, and application. Now, every governance framework will require supporting tools and systems to operate effectively. And for EDM01 governance objective, which is around ensured governance framework setting and maintenance, you should include at least the COBIT and related products or tools that would provide structures, guidance, and measurement for implementation of the governance. You can also invest in equivalent frameworks and standards which can be tailored to the needs of the organization, like ISO 38500, which concerns around enterprise governance, as well as the NIST frameworks that we just discussed. Now, these tools will support governance, monitoring, performance, reporting, as well as compliance, right? So, they also ensure that governance related data like metrics, audits, and performance indicators are captured, analyzed, and reported in a systemic manner. So, bringing all these components together, we started our discussion by understanding what goals at an enterprise level and an IT level that this particular governance objective is going to meet. How we are going to validate that through the metrics that can be associated with that particular goal, IT alignment goal as well as the enterprise goal, because your enterprise goal drives or creates your IT alignment goals, and your IT alignment goals gives you the objectives. And this is the objective that we are focusing on is EDM01, ensured governance framework setting and maintenance. And under these objectives, we also discussed in extensive detail about some of the practices that must be in place, and for achieving the outcomes of those practices, what are some of the activities that must be done, right? We discussed in extensive details. We discussed what organizational structure that must be in place to ensure the metrics that we discussed against each of those practices are achievable. What are the skills and the skills and competencies your people must be having, those who are part for um, executing this governance objective. What are the policies that must be curated, evaluated, and approved in order to achieve the outcomes of this particular governance objective? And what are certain cultural and ethical behaviors that must be embedded into the day to day practices or everyday practices that must be implemented? And what are some of the services and tools that must be implemented to measure and sustain the performance of the governance? Now, together, these components will be able to transform governance from a static concept into a living and evolving practice, one that would support accountability, transparency, and continuous improvement across the enterprise. Now, this was all about your governance objective number one, which is EDM01, which deals with ensured governance framework setting and maintenance, right? So, that was all about it. Thank you for listening. It was a pleasurable experience to bring you this topic. Keep sticking with us, and we will discuss a lot of other governance and management objectives, and see what are the intricacies for implementing them in the day to day basis. So, thank you again for listening.